I'm going to introduce Michael, and we are so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. Yes, and it's all about having a good time. So as we learn, right? So if you could please introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great. Your name and organization. I'm also going to share a link to this presentation. It will be posted later in the app. But right now you can just open this up on another tab and have it there for later if you want to circle back to it and look up some of the links and some of the other information. So the presentation link is in the chat. So my name is Michael Matos, and thank you all for introducing yourselves there in the chat. Please continue to do that. I'm the Education Technology Director for an organization in Chicago called Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition. I've also added, hopefully you can see here, a doc sharing and email, matosmichael2@gmail.com. A lot of these activities I've created, so there's a lot of moving parts that you need to put them together. So even though I do have a website that I'll share with you with resources, resource links, a lot of the completed activities and so on, I keep in my Google Drive under this email, matosmichael2@gmail.com, where you can send me an email and I'll give you access to all that stuff. It's all free. You can use it, change it around, edit it to meet whatever goals or levels you're working with. I'm also your COABE Region 3 representative, which is something that I really enjoy doing, and I get the opportunity to meet so many great people in Region 3 in the beautiful Midwest of our country here. So I'm going to get started here by sharing some more resources with you. I will attempt to put all of these, I could probably do that right now. Let me see here. So I will put all of these links in. I'll probably have some time to go into a few of these and show you a little bit more about them, but I first want to kind of run down all the background and then why I put my activities together and deliver them the way I do and so on. So I will put all of these links in the chat. So they're all there. I also use a lot of QR codes. My students always have a handy phone, right, where they can take a picture of this and open it up and then save it. Or a tablet that they're currently using. So once again, they can open these up with the QR codes. And the QR codes are in order with the sample lesson design for math, and this one on fractions being the first one, and then the financial literacy games and housing and the riddle math magic activity. These are all Google Forms. So you're welcome to participate and complete them while we're on this webinar here, and or you can also use them and switch them around, edit them however you want, and use them with your learners. So I'm going to leave that up just for another 10 seconds or so, and I'm going to continue here. So talking about ESL and ELL learners and their successes in math. So some of the obstacles that instructors and myself working with ESL and ELL learners, we have limited prior knowledge and their background knowledge. So there's those cultural differences and linguistics. And an example of those language difficulties are these polysemious words, which may be troublesome in math class. And I will bring you some examples of that. And I put together this chart here with a word, a meaning in everyday life, and a meaning in math. And you can start to see where that confusion would come in for our English, the second language learners, and how that would be something that we have to work with as part of teaching the actual numbers skills, right? There has to be quite a bit of vocabulary building and quite a bit of just understanding the English language, and maybe even two dictionaries, right? Your math dictionary and your regular dictionary, and looking through that process, creating enough examples, enough activities that allow your students to understand where these differences occur and how to use them in a math forum. Just like every math at every level, reading comprehension, understanding vocabulary, understanding that definition of the word as it's used in a math context is very important, and obviously something that requires more examples and more work with when we're talking about ESL, ELL learners. Some examples that I can give you, and these come from mathwords.com. Mathwords.com, as you can see down at the bottom there, a great site to look at some of these skills, these language skills that we need in order to start teaching some of those numerical skills, these operation skills for math understanding. And as you can see here, some of these words and how they would be used. For example, one of my favorite ones, the beauty store grossed a total amount of $1,700 for the day, even though clients were grossed out by the smell of raw sewage permeating throughout the store. So just some great vocabulary to work with students as we start to understand the meaning within the math world. Looking at some other features, so syntactic and semantic features that we can see in word problems, which do cause these challenges for ESL, ELL learners. You know, the synonyms, the add, plus, combine, sum, and then those homophones, right, where you got some and ho, right? Difficult expressions like if, then, given that, you know, propositions or the phrasal verbs, you know, divided into versus divided by, above, over, from, near, to, until, towards, besides. All of these words, we have to create enough activities that builds that practice for this understanding as we move through this. Please, any questions as I'm going along, put them in the chat and we'll get to them. So these pages are a little crowded, but I'm only going to summarize some of the things here. Some of the teaching strategies that I look at as I'm developing these activities, and I'm looking at what my new class looks like, and surveying them and asking them the best way I can, whether it's spoken or digitally or on paper. What are their goals? What are their needs? How do they use math in everyday life? And how have they learned math in their own language, which is very important as well. So I always start with a number of surveys delivered depending on the levels of my students. So the first one, teach mathematical vocabulary and language structures, and that's a daily thing, right? Some of the things I do for this, you know, vocabulary cards and you know, looking at number lines and diagrams and so on. I model the problem and the solving process by talking aloud while solving problems on an overhead or a chalkboard or interactive whiteboard to demonstrate my thinking process. And hopefully it's something that they can follow along a little further and maybe mimic that process as they're working through problems. You know, use a lot of close exercises and sentence prompts and so on. so students can copy and complete when they enter in class, or reviews and so on. Computation problems, so I give my students computation problems to solve, then have them write the steps they used to solve it. And of course, I try to work with complete sentences, but this obviously, I'm looking at all ESL, ELL levels, from the literacy level to the advanced level. So obviously, these are adjusted as I work through these different levels. Looking at design and what to include in my activities. So a lot of multisensory lessons that address various student learning styles, right? Visual, auditory, tactile. We use visuals whenever possible, and using those charts, graphs, manipulative diagrams, models, real objects, right? These realia pieces, as we call them. Provide explicit instruction and practice when reading and writing word problems. Teach students to identify key words and solving problems, and work from that. As we start, it's important to use as much visuals as possible, and graphic organizers really do help with those visuals. And a very simple graphic organizer to use is rows and columns, and start getting your students to understand how to read rows and columns, and how to come up with an expression or equation from the information in a row or a column, or rows and columns, and being able to solve from there. When ESL students speak, focus on their message rather than their grammatical skills. And as you're working on those math skills and trying to determine that vocabulary, and setting up equations or expressions from what they're saying, from what they're reading, it's important to start that way. Respond using the proper grammatical form rather than just correcting mistakes. Okay. Integrate reading, writing about math. I use them. I always give my students a math journal, so that where we can create kind of a history of what we've been working on, and the vocabulary and so on, and they can look back through it. Give ESL students alternate ways to participate in, like, whole class discussions, in pairs, groups. And we're all, as ESL instructors, we're all very good at doing that. And even putting these groups together where you have that one that people turn to, that one student that maybe knows a little bit more about the subject or that particular activity, to help to share and motivate the group. Integrate hands-on activities. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, real life materials works well, materials that they use at home and at work. Educational technology tools whenever possible, and I'll show you some examples of those. Games, and I'll definitely show you some examples of those. Teach that math note-taking skills. It's an effective way of learning how to translate the information that we know already, or the words that we know, and then continue to learn from those that we don't. And obviously, use games, especially I use games for vocabulary and concepts in math. And keep going here. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the reading strategy is very important. As we look at the reading strategies, looking at, restating, underlining, and highlighting, studying a graph, drawing a graph, circling numbers, numeric phrases within a reading or a situation, rereading a problem, think of a similar problem. A lot of these reading strategies are very important in this approach. So just a summary of everything that I had on there. Some of the ones that I make sure that I include. And to introduce vocabulary, as I mentioned, to model, as I mentioned, think and write of your math biography, journal writing, really what I'm looking at here. Think aloud techniques, as mentioned, games, because games develops that memory, that sequence, that repetition, matching definition and words, real life connections and matching, learning common words and math words as their connections. Most of this I've mentioned already in the strategies. And once again, just as a summary, and then math symbols, which is something that I didn't talk about specifically, and math procedures and word problems, something else that I try to include as well. So real quick, I know I went through some of the background and how I set this up. I'm sorry for the siren in the background here, but I wanted to see if I can get you all on a quizzes activity, very simple math. So I'm going to go to my quizzes sign in here. Let me get out of the presentation real quick just to make sure that everyone has it. And there you go. Can everyone see that, hopefully?
We see it great. I do, at least.
Okay, so we're going to go very simple address. You don't have to sign up for anything or anything like that. Just go to join my quiz. So join my quiz, all together, no spaces.com, and enter join code 226129. And if you haven't used the so-called apps, so-called gamification apps, I'm going to give you a few of them throughout our session here, but obviously related to a lot of other things that I'm working on as part of the gamification. So just to start us off and get us doing something engaging here, as you just heard me talk about the more boring parts and not resource sharing, but the background and my basic strategies. And we're seeing everybody sign up there. Great, great. Keep going. And, you know, because of the repetition, because of the engagement and the just the images really, and the graphics that you get, any one of these, you can create your own. I'm actually borrowing this from the library that they have on quizzes. And look in the chat here. Okay. Yeah, if you just came into, there's some links in the chat that hopefully you can access. And if you want to open up those resources, and you could always take a look at them a little bit more in detail later, but at least you have them. Okay, I'm going to wait just another 30 seconds here. In the meantime, I'm going to put my email in the chat as well, because that is for my Google Docs sharing. If you're interested in any of the activities that I'm about to show, feel free to send me an email. That's what I use that email and that Google Drive for. And I will share whatever I have. Okay, so I'm going to get started here just for the sake of time and being able to go through a few more of these. So here we go. Okay. All right, good luck. And of course, you could always turn on some music. Now this is all a free version of this, and the others that I'll show you later, all free versions. Obviously, if you get a paid version, you can do a lot more. I know that there's some of these games where you can even add your own background music as well. You can make these names anonymous. You can just choose characters or icons for your participants. So there's a lot of different things you can do, but you can do a lot with the free version of all of these. There's some also that have a student management system where you can actually follow the progress with different activities with different learners. You can also do this if you're working virtually as breakout groups, and give the team names. This is an individual one that I chose, but I could have chose teams, and that you could also set up depending on who's in what breakout group, and that could be as part of the competition, which our learners all love competition. Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to let you complete that. You could put a time limit on this, and I'll go back to it real quick. You could put a time limit on this, or you can just let it go and just let the students work on it until everyone's complete. So that is another way to help students engage a little more, because they know that they can attempt, maybe not get it right the first time, try again the second time, and they've got enough time depending on what you're looking at as your strategies for that activity. Okay, well, thank you very much for participating in that. I'm going to keep going and get to some of my resources, ideas, and so on. So one of the things that I work with quite a bit is key operation words for solving word problems. And I believe that this question was actually on the app, and I believe it was how many words you can find for sum. Was it sum or addition? As you can see here under addition, there's a few. We keep adding to this all the time as we're working through problems. Depending on the level, of course, the chart might look differently, but there are combinations of words that also lead us to an operation. So we work with that as well. Great thing for the very lowest levels to start writing these words in their journals, and then start to look at where they saw these words, and then how they could identify with these words as the vocabulary part of it. Using activities like a word sort, and there's a number of these online, or you can also find how to put these together online. I created this one from those ideas. Basically, I have my students choose 5 words that they believe are similar in meaning from this word bank. And of course, you could adjust the word bank different levels. And then in their own words, explain why they think these words belong together. And it can be however they want to put this down. And some may refer to just building a title, and the title would say why these words belong together as well. From there, we can take it to a dictionary, some other work to look at whether they are correct, or we need to shift them to another group, or identify other groups, and just keep working with what we know, what we're bringing to the table, and what we still need to build as vocabulary. I use a lot of mnemonics, and I try to have my students at different levels, and of course I put the mnemonic idea at different levels so they understand and are able to go back and forth and be able not only to learn some new words, but be able to use this mnemonic to solve particular problems. Okay, and there's a few more examples. And the page where I've got some of these from, also another great resource is onlinemathlearning.com. And you can see that right down here, onlinemathlearning.com. If you open up this presentation, which I shared the link earlier in the chat, all of these are links, so you can click right on there and it will take you to these particular sites that I've noted so far. Okay, great. I use a lot of money stories, poems, songs, and then I develop activities for practice, at all levels. Obviously, you can see here many times when we're teaching math or financial literacy, for example, which is a big part of math as well, we look at starting with money, right? And especially with ESL and ELL learners. And so what I have found is that looking at some of these stories and poems and songs really go a long way to keep the students engaged and really working with very primary idea, but learning a lot from it. And you can take it even further. And these are just some of the example poems and songs that I use with my learners. And for many of these, I've took it a step further, as I'll show you an example of in a minute. And you can find a lot of these throughout the internet, just doing Google searches. And there's many of them on actual reputable math sites where you can look up some of this information. So looking at a poem and following it up with some questions, even like a song. So this is an example of the little higher level Shel Silverstein poem, where from where the sidewalk ends, which is a really nice material. Let me go back here. And basically what I've added is activities to this. The activities to this are on my my Google Doc sharing, and you'll be able to see a number of activities for this one poem and all the other activities that I have under these stories and poems about money and songs. So another thing that I created especially for my, let me go back here so you can see the animation, for my ESL learners is these animated slide presentations, whether they be Google Slides or Microsoft PowerPoint. I've created these tutorials that they can keep in their files, right? They can open it up on their computer, they can open it up on their phone, on their tablet, and be able to see the process to work through these calculations through the American way of doing it, because I'll show you some examples in a little bit of what they might have learned in their own country, for example, for division. So I try to animate these things, and as you can see, hopefully see some of the animations there. So they'll have them with these highlighted parts to the animation, and the animations are actually even longer than this. I kind of abbreviated it for this presentation. And they're able to, if they're working on their own and there's not an instructor, or maybe they just need to refresh on a particular area, they can look at this and go back and work through their activities. Obviously, you see here that we have a lot, it's mostly numerics. There's not a lot of wording here. However, there are special words, right? Like area, and we might have length and width. Working with a particular formula, and it's a start to understanding the definition of some of these words as they're working through a particular function. As you can see here, a little bit more animations here. And these will all play. They'll play automatically. I can set them up where they'll play longer. I can set them up where they click and see it. It depends on how the student wants the review to look like. So it's very tailored. There's so many of these that I put in their folders depending on what we're working on, what skill, and they're able to refer to those right away. And then I've also put in some videos as well. Those videos that obviously the spoken English is a little slower, so they can understand those steps. I look at the process done within different countries as well. So for example, subtraction with borrowing, as you can see, the United States version and the European method. And I look at those strengths that our students bring. I don't want to have them forget about this and just go with the United States version. I want them to use the strengths and the understandings that they have from what they bring from their country. Just understand, as I mentioned earlier about symbols, understand the symbols and what you're actually answering. So are you answering the question? And so you can see here the importance with symbols from the United States and the Poland version of the long division. So that is a lot more background that I work with and just preparing the students. A lot of my activities deal with draw and write about numbers. That gets our students understanding, once again, the vocabulary. I use a lot of navigation online. For example, drag and drop. I can also print these out and I can cut them out and they can do some dragging and dropping on a desk, right, with these. So the answers are there. The explanation is there. It's basically using the arrows to connect the whole problem with the results, right? So everything is there. I have a lot of those activities that I work with. You can find online activities where you can build these charts and they're interactive, right? And I'll cover where I got a lot of these activities as well in a minute. Using a lot of rows and columns, as you can see, these can be put together really easily. And you can click on these and actually type in these on the computer, as well as submit them or send them or save them, however it is that you want to do that. The same thing with number lines. You can make number lines interactive. You can draw on them. You can work with them. Some very simple understanding. Creating tables, you'll see a lot of this in my work here, a lot of rows and columns and understanding these ideas by actually doing. First, there's modeling by me and then actually doing and practicing. And whether you're virtual or in person, you can still go around and ask the mean, median, or mode range for these activities as we work through them. A lot of conversion and understanding that we need to give them that conversion chart and have them go through the vocabulary and understanding the vocabulary and looking at what is a price per container unit, what is a price per gallon. There's a lot of pre-understanding before these activities. Using stuff like a very simple ordering form. I put this together from an Excel template that you get when you open up a new Excel sheet. And you're able to give out some magazines, ordering magazines, or go online and look up some information to order and put that in there and get your amount and so on. Great skill. We would love for all our students to have that luxury of going on a website and setting up an account and ordering stuff on that site like we do on a regular basis with no problem. More conversions, the Fahrenheit, Celsius, and cooking and so on. And once again, using the rows and columns. And notice that I do have a lot of visuals. I try to keep things engaged with visuals, whether they're printed out or they're on their computers, whether we're working in class or virtually. This one, and I'm sorry it's a little faded, I actually started with one of those poems, one a penny poem. and then looked at a worksheet that I could develop from this poem. And as you can see there, it's starting with a penny and working my way up to that penny to the 12th power, and how much money does that produce? And working with my students to understand the value of 1 penny and the value of that expression of an exponent, right? Another one that I use, and this is a website called shoulder.org, and I do want to just click on this one and show you a little bit. Hopefully it comes up pretty quick. Okay, so it's holding up a little bit. So let's go back to it in a minute. I'll sign in. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. If you have not used shoulder.org, it's a great interactive site. So it's got hundreds of interactive activities where you can go in there and work through those interactives and basically work through everything from geometry to calculus through these playful activities. A lot of great, I used to use it quite a bit to teaching students everything from basic geometry to the Pythagorean theorem. And this one is just flipping a penny, and from that penny, making a prediction first, right? And from that, the 10 tosses, which you could do 10 tosses virtually on there, you can create other activities. So from those 10 tosses, what is the fraction? What is the ratio? What is the proportion? What is the probability? We can look at all of this from a very simple activity and an engaging, playful one. There's so much on there that you can add to the activities that they're playing live back in the classroom with your own original activities. This is another one that I created off another shoulder.org activity, as you can see here, just filling in those missing blanks, and working with the pennies up on top. Some other very basic activities and using formulas, very little wording as the word problem and pictures, and of course my table, my rows and columns, and looking at that and how to arrange that. So let me see if I can put in shoulder.org. So it should be like that, shoulder.org, SHODOR.org. Hopefully you can get on that on your end. I don't want to lose you here. So I also work with a lot of probability, looking at money, looking at probability, trying to figure out where my students are at. And as you can see here, I try to make all my activities where they can be used in class on a hard copy if you have to, or they could be used on your computer digitally, where it will save the information for you into your folder and so on. And obviously, some basic digital literacy skills are required, but we always try to go through that at the beginning and as we go along with different basic skills that are needed. I developed these activities through the developer tab in Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. There's a developer tab that you need to basically open up, go into your file, and you'll go into all the tabs, and you'll see that ribbon, that tab and that ribbon is missing, and you just open it up. I created these with that developer tab, where it makes a static document become active and interactive and involved. It brings it to life in the virtual sense, right? So you can add these boxes where you can just check off the correct answer. You can add these text boxes that don't move, but you can type in them and be able to look and see the entire answer in there. So you can once again, make this interactive. So hopefully if you get a chance, go and explore that. It's the developer tab and all those Microsoft products. Once again, another one that I put together, going shopping, and we also do virtual shopping trips, and we gather virtual coupons and add them to our virtual shopping trip. So we can do that as well. Back before pandemic, we would go in person to some stores as well, and look through this, and even do window shopping and take notes of things in the neighborhood that we were in. But looking at this, once again, developed through the developer tab in Word, I put all these prices right here. So you would click choose an item, and it would bring up your choices here of your answer. And then you would click on it, and it's there. It stays there. You save this document, and your instructor has access to it. So as I mentioned earlier, looking at sale prices, looking at coupons, a great real life activity. And I'm sorry about the background on this. It became a little bit lighter, but I'll adjust it a little bit. And looking at, for example, a Macy's coupon. So many of my students shop at the area stores. And so how do we evaluate coupons? So if we look at some sales and you look at the markdown rate, then you look at the sale price, and then some may say, well, if you've used the company card, right? Are there coupons on shoulder.org? No, there aren't any coupons on shoulder.org activities that I know of. However, if you've ever used gcflearnfree.org, which is another resource, and I will get to my resource page in a minute. The gcflearnfree.org has a number of activities using coupons in their math section, and they actually have a math section for English as a second language learners as well. So looking at markdowns, sometimes when I look at my markdowns and I go to a store, I'm just I look at it and I'm like, they should be paying me, giving me this item for free, and then giving me some money back because of all the percentages I got off. So how does this really work? So yeah, and then working with scenarios, and obviously this would be like an intermediate ESL one, but looking at lower levels, it could be a few words that we're analyzing, and I would just put in the pair of jeans at $27.99, right, each, and cut it down a little bit. But looking at shopping not as a right or wrong answer, but your best choices for the best return on your money. Basically looking at those ideas that we look at for financial literacy and teaching financial literacy. No right or wrong answer. It's the evaluation process. It's the critical thinking, and how do we put the best choices together. Looking at paycheck deductions, and how do you look through that and evaluate that. Looking at recipes and converting recipes. There are a number of recipe sites that you can use online, just like there's a number of coupon sites that you can use online, and bring those in. Looking at nutritional facts and asking those questions on nutritional facts. Yes, they might not all lead to a numeric where we would consider it to be math, but all of this, the understanding of all of this that is being read and asked here, does lead to understanding and working through any numeric or any problem that we need to solve using numerics. Some of the math games, as I mentioned earlier, I use a lot of games to reinforce at the beginning, in the middle, at the end of some more, let's say, serious stuff, even though the games are very serious because they do develop some great skills. And some of these games are developed for kids. However, the skills and the levels of those skills that we're learning is perfect for many of our learners. It's just finding the right one, the right interest for each one of our learners. So it's always important to look through them, play them yourself, make sure that they create that engagement, but also look at what they're teaching through these games and what repetition, what learning is going on here. Because it doesn't necessarily have to exclude animals or even a picture of a kid. It can still work. This is one site I use quite a bit, which is called MrNewsBomb.com. Quite some games that definitely were made for kids, but when you look at it with adults, they make sense as well. This one that I put on there, for example, is Boxing Einstein. So you pick your historical figure. It could be Aristotle. It could be, there's a number of them there. And they box Einstein, and then you pick the skill you want to. This obviously is greater, less than, or equal to skill, but they also have fractions and decimals and so on. They have soccer games that my students love as well. So there's a lot to work with here. Then, of course, there is the game show apps. And just an example of a game show app and how you could develop a lot of things virtually, especially, or even on a screen. As you can see here, this is a virtual dice. And so you can toss these online. They have virtual cards that will shuffle and turn over. All of these things you can find online as well. They're very useful. So just some of the games, and we already played one of them, some of the games that I mentioned, Kahoot, eQuiz Show, Quizalize, Quizlet, and Quizzes, all with some great stuff. And I do have links here to all of them. It'll take you there. To some of these, I actually have links with the presentation here, the eQuiz Show, as you can see here. So that will give you a link to the presentation that I chose. Quizalize, and Quizalize is great, and this is the one we're going to do next, because Quizalize allows you to add the next activity you want them to do. So if they score, for example, you give them this quiz and they score less than 50%. Well, here is the next activity that you already have set up and Quizalize will give to you to complete. And then you can go back, you can set it to go back to the quiz again. They take the quiz again. Now they score between 60 and 80, right? Or 50 and 80. And so they got the next activity. So you work with that activity, it's already set up. You go back to the quiz, you complete the quiz again. This time you get 80%, above 80%. So now you have something set up for above 80%. And they go and complete that. And if you want, you can set it so they go back and redo the same quiz again. So it's really nice because you get all that for free. And you're able to set up this these 3 or 4 activities in a row that come out of one quiz. And obviously you can develop all of these yourself. And this is the Quizlet one, and I have the activity for the Quizlet, obviously all related to math skills and many for ESL, ELL learners. And this is the quizzes one that we did earlier. And the link to that is on there as well. I work with, you know, as I mentioned earlier, with the product info, you know, everything from candy that are obviously called Smarties and adds to the whole engagement to pizza. And believe it or not, there is a number of, I'm sure you've probably heard of a number of math pizza sites. As you can see there, and they kind of went over my, instead of saying websites, as websit. But there's some great pizza sites that I work with my students. Even looking at pizza deals on an Excel spreadsheet and understanding the rows and columns straight out of the Excel spreadsheet, and learning how to figure out how much it costs per slice or per square inch of the slice. Looking at other things, I have these spin wheels that I came up with different pizza fractions. And then I have an activity here where they can put down the spin and then, you know, the letter that was chosen as your answer within the spin wheel. Puzzlemaker.com makes these great puzzles that you can make interactive, or obviously you can print out as well. Just another great way to engage. These pairs and triplets from 11, 11, 11, just some great ideas for that number sense building. and scoring. So I always try to create a little scoring device as well. So they're able to work through that, looking at more numbers and kind of like a Sudoku, the Sweet 16 one here. As I mentioned earlier with cards, as you can see, we have a fraction right here, right? 4 over 5, 2 over 3, and these cards were picked at random. We can now work through for an answer, and of course we have a little chart to put them on, a little graphic, and then as well as a working table to be able to put in our results. There's a number of card games, and I've got so many of them. As you can see, I made a sheet here of different card games that you can use. And as you're also teaching your ESL, ELL learners some of these ideas of these mostly American type card games to work with, even the whole idea of playing war. And I developed my own little war cards with points of war, which was my decimal version, and War and Pieces, which was my fractions version. And they work through those cards and understand the fractions, looking at what's probable in cards. So there's so much that you can put together from dominoes, cards, and dice, and being able to work with that. And it could be virtual. So maybe you don't want the actual item in class. You can do this virtually, as I mentioned before. Looking at another example of a game of 15, Sudoku, and calculator board games. And so all of these are, including my Battleship game, are in my my Google Doc sharing, and also the way that you can construct these on your own and work through these, and just some different activities to work through. So I'm going to go back to, those are mostly riddle activities that I was showing you there. I'm going to go back to my Quizalize activity. And once again, I'm going to have you go on to this page here. Real easy to go on this one. It's zzi.sh. So zzi.sh. And then the code is right up here, J like in Jack, N like in no, P like in price, 28684. Try that out. Let me know in the chat if you're having any difficulty getting on this. So once again, zzi.sh, and then type in JNP 28684. Okay, well, it doesn't look like any of you want to play. That's okay. So that link is on that sheet.
Was it, sorry, was there I logged on to it, but it says that there's no assignments at this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine says the same. It says my first class, you don't have any assignments now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't want you to think that we were just like.
No, that's.
No, there were three of us right
I'm,
there. You could tell Kristen was in the chat box too. We all wanted you to know we're really trying.
I'm glad someone said something. Thank you. And that's okay. That sometimes happens. What happened was that I set these up earlier and then they didn't stay in there. They should have. So some of these you have to set up closer to the actual event. But try this out. Try out Quizalize. As I mentioned earlier, you can create, it's really a scaffolding of activities that you can create after the initial quiz. And it's all there for you and created for you. Okay, well, since we didn't get that, let's see, I've got a few minutes left. So let me go back because I have a number of things on here for you.
And Michael, you are so good. You have gotten every question that you've gotten in the chat box so far. So you are a great multitasker.
Thank you. So this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into this activity that I have here for you. Hopefully everyone can see this. And I'm going to have you do it old school. If you have a sheet of paper near you and a pen or even your phone, I want you to think of a number from 1 to 10. Okay, and I'm not going to put this number in there for you. And the reason I want you to do it just on a sheet of paper, because if you put it on this Google form, you might think that I saw your results, because it obviously records your results, and you do have a link to this. So think of a number from 1 to 10. When you have it, multiply that number by 9. I know I'm having you do some math here midday before lunch, so, or maybe right after lunch, because you guys are Eastern time. All right. And then number 3, if it is a 2-digit number, add them together. So you started out with a number from 1 to 10, you multiplied it by 9, and if the result of that was a 2-digit number, add them together. Now subtract 5 from that number. Let me see if I can leave all these up here so you can look back. Okay, so we thought of a number from 1 to 10, we multiplied by 9. If it was a 2-digit number, we added them together, and then we subtracted 5. You should have a number between 1 and 26. Okay, now that everybody has a number between 1 and 26, go ahead and choose a letter that corresponds with that number. Okay, so now you have a letter. Now take that letter and think of a country that starts with that letter. So we have a number of countries here to choose from. Please choose from one of the countries that is on here. Okay, so everybody should have a country. Okay, now think about the second letter in that country's name. All right, so you have a country, you took the second letter of that name, of that country's name. So for example, if you picked Hungary, the second letter would be a U. Now take that second letter and pick one of these animal names. Now, my ESL learners love this, no matter how low the level is in English. They love these
You have
kind
a
of.
request to share this with the group. Is this in your presentation, Michael?
It isn't. It's one of the links that I shared at the beginning. So it's actually a Google form that I shared at the beginning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. So now you have a country name and an animal name, right? And notice one of the animals on here, okay? I don't want like unicorns or dragons. That's what my daughter would choose. So now I give that animal an accurate color. Okay, so you have a country, an animal, and you gave that animal an accurate color. Okay, so now my job is to think about the country you might have chosen, the animal and the color of that animal, using probability and using all the math that I put in here and the choices that I gave you. So hopefully that the probability was on my side. I did not know that there were gray elephants in Denmark.
You're a magician, Michael. We have a magician here, you guys. That's amazing.
So that's probability, and you can find a lot of these online, and most of them are free to use. You know, you can teach probability and fractions and ratios and everything else that goes with it, and why this happen where you probably got 40 or 50% of the people to actually meet that probability.
Well, this was awesome. What a fun way to end our session, Michael. Thank you so much. This has been just outstanding. I am not an ESL teacher, but I am still absolutely fascinated. And I know that my ABE students are going to really do well with this stuff. So thank you so much. I think we've got all the questions. I'm in a room where the light constantly goes out. I would like to remind you that you can rate your sessions. There was a little glitch before, but if you could go back and rate this session, we would all certainly appreciate it. We always want good feedback. And I agree with what Erica just said, Michael. Thank you so much. This was a very good session. Really got our brains going. And thank you so much. So you can find this presentation uploaded later with the recording and with all of this goodies. So with that being said, I think we've got about a 13-minute break before our next session starts at 3 o'clock. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see ya hopefully tonight too for 7 o'clock trivia.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. Have a good one, guys.
You too.
Thanks. Have a good one.